What would you do if someone half your age looked at you, not with pity, not with politeness, but with desire? Not because you were lonely or vulnerable, but because he saw something you had long forgotten about yourself? It happened to me on a quiet Thursday night I was just visiting my son, helping him settle into his new life. I had no intentions, no expectations. And yet, one moment changed everything. The man wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a flirt at a party or a passing glance at a cafe. He was my son's boss. And what started as harmless conversation turned into something else, something dangerous, confusing, and painfully illuminating. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman to tell a story like this. But here I am. Because once it happened, I couldn't forget it. I'm Claire Dawson, 46 years old, high school English teacher, divorced for nearly a decade, and until recently, someone who believed her life had settled into a predictable, comfortable rhythm. I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Portland, Oregon. My days follow a well-worn script: morning coffee on the porch, grading papers, reading at night with my cat curled beside me. Peaceful. Predictable. Sometimes, if I'm honest, painfully so. My son, Adam, is 24. Fresh out of college, full of energy and ideas, and recently relocated to Austin for a tech job at a promising startup. He's the kind of person who makes things happen, quick to laugh, slow to doubt himself. The kind of person I sometimes wish I had been at that age. When he invited me to visit, I didn't hesitate. We hadn't seen each other in nearly a year. He'd been busy settling into his new life, and I'd been busy pretending I didn't miss him as much as I did. The phone calls helped, but they weren't the same. You miss the small things: his sarcastic sense of humor, the way he slouches when he's tired, his appetite for my pasta. He told me I'd be staying in a guest house owned by his boss, Nathan Carter, just a short walk from his apartment. "It's empty most of the time," Adam had said casually. "Nathan said it's yours for the week." I expected a modest space, something functional. What I walked into, though, was something out of a home decor magazine. Sleek wood floors, soft grey walls, dim accent lighting, and artwork I didn't understand but couldn't stop staring at. A faint smell of cedar and leather lingered in the air, expensive and intentional. This was not just a spare guest space. It was curated, elegant, personal. "Your boss is generous," I remarked to Adam over lunch the next day. He nodded, barely glancing up from his phone. "Yeah, Nate's cool. Kind of intense, but not in a bad way. He's just sharp, you know." I didn't press. I simply tucked the thought away. I didn't meet Nathan that first day. Or the second. But by the fourth night, I came back from an evening walk and found him sitting in the living room, barefoot, a glass of wine in his hand, like he'd always belonged there. And that was the moment everything quietly, irreversibly began to change. I stopped in the doorway, heart skipping just enough to make me feel silly. Nathan stood when he saw me, setting his wine glass on the coffee table. "You must be Claire," he said, voice smooth, warm, a little too steady for a stranger standing barefoot in a house that wasn't supposed to be occupied. "I wasn't expecting anyone," I replied, tightening my sweater around my waist. He smiled. "I live here. Temporarily. I just got back into town. Sorry for barging in like this. Adam said you were comfortable here, and I didn't want to interrupt." His presence caught me off guard. Nathan Carter wasn't what I had imagined. I don't know what I expected: a stiff tech executive, maybe a little arrogant, a little cold. But this man. He looked more like a novelist than a startup CEO. Dressed down, hair tousled, with a kind of quiet confidence that filled the space without demanding it. "No, it's fine," I said. "Thank you for letting me stay here. It's beautiful." He nodded, gesturing to the couch. "Stay. Join me for a bit. I'm not great company, but I make a decent glass of wine." I should have said no. I should have excused myself, gone to my room, and read a book with the door firmly closed. But I didn't. I sat down. And we talked. It started simply: books, favorite cities, cooking disasters. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. He was charming, but not in a way that made me immediately suspicious. It felt easy, natural. You and Adam are close, he said at one point. We are, I said. He's all I've got, really. After the divorce, it was just the two of us. Nathan nodded, his eyes studying me in a way that made me self-conscious and strangely seen. Must have been hard. Raising him alone. It was, I admitted. But we figured it out together. You do what you have to. There was a pause, a silence that didn't feel empty. You don't talk about yourself much, he said quietly. I smiled. I'm a teacher. I spend most of my day listening. He laughed softly. I think that's part of what I noticed about you. You make people feel like they can talk. My heart stuttered. Asterisk, what did he just say? Asterisk. I barely said 2 words when we met, I said, trying to keep my tone light. And I haven't stopped thinking about you since. There it was. A shift. A line crossed, and we both knew it. I looked down at my hands, suddenly aware of the chipped polish on my nails. Nathan. I'm older. He finished for me, gently. Yes. And you're also beautiful. Grounded. Real. You know who you are, and that's rare. I didn't know how to respond. My body was still, but inside, everything fluttered like a moth against glass. He stood. I should let you rest. Early meeting tomorrow. I didn't move. I wasn't sure I could. When he disappeared into the hallway, I sat in the quiet, pulse racing, mind tangled with things I hadn't felt in years. Desire. Guilt. Confusion. I wasn't stupid. I knew what this looked like. I was the guest. The mother of his employee. This was inappropriate. Irresponsible. And yet, the next day, I avoided him. I took my coffee to the balcony, stayed out longer than usual, kept my eyes low when I came back. That night, Adam called to say he'd be working late and wouldn't be stopping by. I told him to get some sleep, promised to leave some leftovers at his place. By 9 p.m., I was curled on the couch, reading. I didn't expect to hear a knock. It was Nathan. Holding 2 cups. Chamomile, he said. Not wine. I figured, less dangerous. I took the cup. Our fingers touched. Just for a second. It was all it took. Something had begun. Neither of us had said it aloud. But I could feel it. And part of me was terrified. Because I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the silence between us taut but oddly tender. I sipped the tea slowly, willing it to calm the storm inside me. Nathan watched me over the rim of his cup. No words, no expectations. Just the hum of something unspoken filling the space. I should have left yesterday, I said finally. He nodded. I know. But I didn't. His eyes didn't leave mine. I was glad you stayed. I placed the cup on the table and stood, walking to the window. The lights of Austin glimmered in the distance, blinking like they were winking at some private joke I didn't get. I haven't been touched in a long time, I said softly, the words surprising even me. Not just physically. I mean, seen. I see you, he replied immediately. There wasn't an ounce of hesitation in his voice. I've seen you since the moment I walked into this apartment. I turned, hugging my arms around myself. You barely know me. He shook his head. I know enough. I know the way you listen without interrupting. I know the way you make silence feel safe. I know the way you smile when you talk about Adam, like your whole life has been wrapped around him. I sat again, my legs suddenly too tired to stand. I didn't expect this, I whispered. I came here to see my son. I was looking forward to eating bad takeout and reorganizing his kitchen. He laughed gently. You still can. This shouldn't happen, I said. You're his boss. I'm his mother. He finished again. Yes, you are. And you're also a woman who deserves more than silence and routine. You've spent so long making space for everyone else. Claire. Who makes space for you? The room tilted for a moment. My throat tightened, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes, not because of him, but because of what I'd been pretending not to need for so long. I didn't want to fall in love with Nathan Carter. That wasn't what this was. It was more fragile than that. More dangerous, too. It was recognition. Two people brushing up against the truth of who they were beneath the roles they played. I'm not looking for a new chapter, I said carefully. I'm still stuck between the old ones. I'm not asking you to be anything you're not, he replied. I just don't want to pretend this isn't real. And that's when I realized something painful and piercing. I wanted to be wanted. Not as a mother, not as someone's ex-wife. As a woman. And for the first time in years, I felt that. From him. But the cost of that feeling. It was high. Too high. I can't hurt Adam, I said, voice cracking. Nathan's face softened. Then we won't. He stood, and I stood with him. He leaned in, pressed his forehead gently against mine. Some things don't need to be lived out to be real. And then he left. Quietly. Without asking for more. And I stood alone in a room that suddenly felt both full and unbearably empty. I left 2 days later. Adam drove me to the airport, blissfully unaware of the emotional wreckage tucked beneath my calm voice and folded sweaters. He talked about a new project, a potential raise, how he might adopt a dog. I nodded, smiled, gave the occasional all while my mind drifted back to one pair of eyes that had seen me a little too clearly. Nathan didn't call. He didn't text. And I didn't reach out either. We didn't owe each other anything, and maybe that's what made it all feel so piercingly honest. What passed between us was brief, barely tangible, but it had weight. The kind that leaves fingerprints on your memory. Back in Portland, the days resumed their rhythm. The porch. The school. The grocery store aisles. But something in me had shifted, like someone had opened a window in a room that had been sealed for years. The air felt different now. Lighter. Sharper. Sometimes I caught myself reaching for that shift, wearing a bolder color, saying no when I used to say yes, laughing just a little louder at something that made me feel alive. It wasn't about Nathan, not really. It was about what he reflected back at me, a woman still capable of desire, of being desired. A woman who still had chapters left to write, even if she didn't know what they'd say yet. I never told Adam. Maybe someday I'll hint at it when we're both older and less fragile. Or maybe it will stay locked inside, like a faded letter in the back of a drawer. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones no one else ever reads. I don't know if I regret what happened. I think I'd regret it more if it hadn't. Because for one fleeting moment, I wasn't defined by motherhood, or divorce, or age. I was just me. And being seen that clearly, however briefly, was both the most terrifying and the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced.